Owner looked for his lost dog everywhere and finally found her in a field doing something really odd. Wei is an ordinary stray dog with an extraordinary life story. She was born as a stray dog but got adopted by a man thanks to her cuteness. Soon she became the mother of a litter of pups and devoted her life to looking after her pups. She would roam around the area in noon in search of food and would come back in order to feed them, but one day she did not return. Her owner set off the home in order to find her, but she was nowhere to be found. Then someone suggested him to look for her in a nearby field. He went there with a heavy heart, and what he found there was beyond his imagination. Alejandra Griffa, a local resident, was in her home when she heard a muffled cry coming from outside. Initially, she ignored, but soon realized that something was not right, as the cry did not stop for a second. She gathered that cry was coming from a field in front of her building. As she looked through the window, she made her way towards the place. There was indeed something going on in the field, and what she saw made her jaw drop. Dogs have always been man's best friend. They are loyal, cute, and true companions of humans. But same can't be said about humans. Many of those who get home are forced to face brutality of their owners, and those who do not get any has to face the inclemency of nature. Wei is a stray dog who spent most of her life in the slum. The full-grown dog was well acquainted with the hardships that life throws on someone. The story is about Wei, who used to live with her owner in a deprived town of Buenos Aires, Argentina. All they have in the name of the house is a pile of shacks made of wood and metal scraps. The passages are dirt-made that also does the job of separating the homes that look like huts. The improper construction and poverty make the people and their homes vulnerable to crimes. The area is all cramped with houses that make it difficult for them to go through the area. Hence, the area has no protection at all. Shanty towns of this sort are quite unpredictable. There is no demarcation, as the rate of poverty is so high in the area that most of the families have one or two criminals among them, and those families who don't have any criminals among them are the ones who live in threat all the time. Cops don't like to enter these areas as they are not only congested but are extremely unhygienic too. No need to say that the crime rate increased here by leaps and bounds as it remained ignored by the authorities for a long time. The crime rate increased so rapidly in the area that the authorities had to implement a 24-hour policing system. Unfortunately, the deplorable conditions of the residents remained the same. People were still struggling to get food. Among all these bad things, there was someone who had won every individual's heart. Wei was her name. The dog was a slum-born. She had taken birth with a litter of siblings. The slum life had taught her a lot. She would do whatever it takes to get food, be it borrowing, begging, and stealing. She knew that food was necessary in order to survive. Luckily, the dog never had to struggle a lot for food, as her cuteness would win over people's hearts. This way, one day Pooch met her new owner. It was a perfect match. He would look after her, feed her, and love her. In no time, she became a family to her owner. No matter where she stays all day, she would make her way back to her owner every evening. Though she had got a lovely family, happiness was far from her. You might be knowing that the birth rates and diseases are higher in the slum areas, and this data does not concern humans only, but animals too. Though some of the dogs find shelter in someone's house, they hardly get neutered or spayed, which means they remain pregnant most of their lives. In some areas, rescuers find them in puppy farms that close down immediately. The probability of catching diseases and infections of the dog is higher in these areas, and their puppies inherit those diseases. Consequently, the dogs of this town do not live long. They all have a shorter lifespan. So was Wei going to meet the same end? Like a stray dog, Wei had undergone many pregnancies. Hence, she knew everything about the areas and the places which were safer for her and her puppies. Her experience had taught her to recognize the people who would give her food. One thing about her was that whenever and wherever she would go, she would always come back to her pups. Wei's owner did not have to make much effort to figure out the pregnancy of Wei. During pregnancy, Wei used to do certain things that would give away about her pregnancy. For example, the girl would disappear the whole day and would come back only in the night to have food. This was her routine, but one day she did not come back. The owner waited the whole night, but there was no trace of her. The man suspected that something was not right. Dawn broke down and still there was no trace of Wei. She had never stayed away from the house for so long, not to mention, the owner got worried and decided to look for her. He went from his friends to neighbors to see if they knew anything about her, but unfortunately none of them knew anything about her whereabouts. He asked everyone about her. He looked for her inside the labyrinth of alleys and went through all the hiding spot he knew. He kept shouting out her name while looking for her, but she did not answer. The man had food in his hand. Perhaps the dog did not get anything to eat and so was unable to walk. Unfortunately, she could not locate her, but other dogs did follow him for the food. Things were getting chilly. The temperature had gone down to 3 degrees Celsius. It was freezing cold outside. There was no way a human could survive this weather, let alone a dog. Where could she go? Moreover, her pups too had gone somewhere. The owner began to imagine the worst. Perhaps Wei had fallen prey to someone's brutality. There are some people who derive pleasure from beating the voiceless animals. Perhaps Wei had become a victim of one of them. He had begun to give up hope when someone suggested him to look for her in a close-by field. The man ran to the field only to see a surprising sight. Slums are quite famous for crimes. Daniel Salcido, chief of police, and his officers tend to get strange calls, of which most were fake. That is the reason he advised his juniors to be cautious while responding to these kinds of calls. But this time Salcido too had no idea on how to respond when he received a call from a woman named Alejandria Griffin. The woman was telling something unbelievable. The news was not believable at all. But ignoring a call would be like ignoring one's duty. So, the officers got into the car and drove towards the field that was in the middle of the slum. They were quite sure that the call was nothing but a prank until the time their eyes caught the sound of cries. There were 6 puppies snuggled to each other. It seemed as if the puppies were glued to each other. Perhaps they were fighting the cold. But as the officers got closer, they realized that the pups were not fighting cold but were hiding something astonishing. Wei was right there. Her pups moved towards her as the officers approached them. As the pups dispersed, a tiny little baby appeared to the scene. He was lying right beneath them. The baby was naked and hungry. He was crying continuously, and maybe that's why Wei laid closer to him and placed her head on his. Salcido could not believe his eyes. He was all stunned. The baby was all alone. Salcido took the baby to the hospital. As the baby was newly born, there were high chances for it of falling ill. Miraculously, the baby was in good condition, leaving aside the few injuries, and weighed about 2.3 kilos as the infant was premature. The authorities finally managed to find the 33-year-old mother of the baby. What does she have to say? Why did she abandon the baby? They asked her why had she abandoned her son. The woman replied by saying that she did this for a reason. She said that she already has 8 mouths to feed and one more would have only added to her problem. Surprisingly, the spot where she had left her baby differed from the place where she was actually found. So does it mean that the baby reached the bunch of trash or dirt by crawling? Wei rushed to the location of the baby when she heard the cry. Most probably, that is when Wei picked him up and took him to the bed she had prepared for her children. It must have been 50 meters away from the location she was found at. The dog had taken the responsibility of taking care of the infant till the time authorities find him. Wei became the star of the eyes of many people once the news of her compassionate nature made headlines all across the country. Media began to call her the miracle baby Santino. People would call her a saint. But Salcido, who had seen the incident with his own eyes, was yet to come to terms with it. He described, "She took it like a puppy and rescued it. The doctors told us if she hadn't done this, he would have died." Dr. Egidio Melta, who is associated with Melchor Romero Hospital, stated about the condition of the baby when he was brought in. He clarified that the baby was only a few hours old when he was admitted to the hospital at 11:30 p.m. Does this story ring a bell to you? Well, there is an ancient Roman myth of Romulus and Remus that follows the same track. The parents of Romulus and Remus abandoned them just a few hours after they were born. A female wolf finds them on the side of a river and rescues them. Not only that, the wolf protected them until a group of shepherds discovered the twins. This story might be a myth, but there have been many real-life stories that are about animals protecting human babies. Dogs have been staying with animals for centuries. They have always proved their loyalty to their human companion. They are very friendly and has affection for newborns. Wei herself was a mother, and so when she saw a human infant lying on the ground all by himself, she decided to help him. Wei knew what she was doing. She tried to keep him warm by covering him with a rag. The baby is in safe hands now and is being watched over round the clock. The authorities are looking after him until a suitable family adopts him. As far as her biological mother is concerned, she got arrested for leaving him. However, the story did not have a happy ending. The authorities did not ignore the current state of Wei and her pups. They decided to give them to a shelter, but for that Wei had to be taken away from her owner. It was a sad moment for all of them, but it was supposed to be done for the good of the dog and the man who was not able to provide her enough food. We have heard numerous stories about human rescuing animals, but rarely come across any story that is about an animal rescuing a human. This story restores our faith in humanity and the fact that animals too have compassion and feelings.